I'm going to just read a couple of pages from, there were two new books published last year. This was called Conversation from Bootstrap Press, plein air editions. Avery, you were talking about we might have the reading outside tonight because we were postponed on the sidewalk. You said it might be a plein air reading. So anyway, this book is called Conversation, and this painting by Matisse is called Conversation. It was in the I saw it years ago in a show in L.A. from paintings from the Hermitage in St. Petersburg, and it was beautiful. It's like 7 feet square painting. I think he painted it between 1908 and 1912. Is that 1908 and 1912? And I imagined that when I wrote these poems some years ago, I thought of this painting on the cover, but I didn't think it would be possible to get it. But it was. I got permission from, both the Matisse estate and the Hermitage to send an image. So I'll just read a couple of pages from this. How the voice is going forward in such a measure, conversation in whose scope the man is standing facing her, as if what he wants to say will reach the porch of her left ear the moment she hears it, where the telephone ringing at 7:20 will be the same person, the sound in the floor that isn't a bird chipping on the roof, meaning that to repeat what you have seen in such a place includes everything except points on a scale called the hand that is holding yours, from which one will learn to desire. The person in the blue shirt meaning one who thinks, being productive in the sense that one can read books on a beach, birds fly over, making wind sounds, where the wind is blowing in a different direction opposite the other person at a different angle, looking down or to her right or left, depending on the position of the observer who is driving the blue car forward, having spent time in the same place as someone else, you, who drives up from behind, pulls alongside, looks a couple of times before driving on. The geometry of lines defined by the tangent of water and sand upon which shells have a limited life. The passage from one person's eyes to the other's, whose color changes depending on what is reflected, gray of sky or the heather of low grasses whose tips scratch hieroglyphs into the dust of the path one is walking after someone else. Two deer positioned on the cracked brown, water has evaporated, available thus to be walked on. The feet of the person making wine-stained purple, crushed grapes attracting hundreds of bees, as if fermentation were feeling as much as pulp, skin, stems, and seeds. Walking across a lawn, green, how one will be struck by peripheral vision, as if voices on stage could reach up through the building through which heat rises. The man who staggers up the aisle after the performance, followed by the woman whose face registers what it means to face the end of his life. Counting that clock linked to the man in a hotel room who suddenly finds himself alone with a gun, the one beside him having shot herself dead, that music as it enters the ear of someone whose eyes will be closed, that person drifting backward or sideways from the person on the balcony to the one, you, who may be walking across a similar stretch of fresh-cut grass. And so on. That one goes on, something like that. So, I wanted to read some poems from, this book is called Cloud Ridge. It was also published last year. It's the third of a trilogy, or a triptych as I used to call it, of 474-page books. And these poems were, this was also a daily writing. It was begun in July 2nd, 2001, and ended in October 18th, 2002. And I thought, since today is June 11th, I would read the poems written on the 11th days of the month, starting in July. 7:11. Sunlight on left sloping surface of ridge below bright blue sky in right corner. Still shadowed shoulder of adjacent ridge. Man in green shirt waking from dream of looking at black and white photo of boy's left shoulder. The woman leaning forward on the edge of the bed. Man in blue jacket stopping to pick up pieces of white quartz. Man in yellow shirt advising him not to. Silver-haired man noting Mann's death in Venice is rewriting the Bacchae, adding that Wagner actually died there. Darker gray plane of cloud moving from left to right against bright blue sky. Sunlit white cloud above curve of waning moon across from it. (8:11). Pink-orange glow in pale blue sky above still dark plain of ridge. Pattern of tobacco plant leaves in the window on the right. Naked man waking from dream about 2%. Upturned curve of waning white moons, light falling across unmade yellow and blue bed. Man in plaid shirt holding up a passion vine flower the color of blonde woman's red dress. Pair of orange moths moving together above the brick red plain. Man in gray bathrobe noting that Syrah has become the grape of Australia. Rows of oak barrels lining driveway on right. Curve of gray-white fog below pale blue sky next to the point. Edge of green wave breaking over man's right shoulder. (9:11). Sparrow moving from lower left perch of feeder to green of Scotch broom branch in right corner. Swept back wingspan of a jet passing overhead. Blonde woman calling on phone to ask man to give short-haired girl her cell phone number. Plane exploding into World Trade Center in New York. White-haired composer talking about technology of distance. The dancer walking in with a copy of The Elegant Universe. Lily Briscoe sitting bolt upright in bed, noting the gray-green light on the wall opposite. Lines of gray-white clouds reflected in nearly motionless water's surface, cormorants flapping across green pine on point in the right foreground. 10:11. Angle of bird slanting from lower right corner of vertical window on the left, the pale blue-white sky above the horizontal line of still dark ridge behind it. Coleridge observing pillars of misty light falling below sun hidden by clouds, great half-moon setting behind the mountain ridge. Man in post office also reading Virginia Woolf, shaved-headed man patching ding on nose of board. Girl in boat dipping her fingers into the water, thinking how we perish each alone. Lines of white water moving across reef to the left of point. Man on a long white board slanting across light blue-green plane of wave, breaking in left corner. 11:11. Gray-white film of clouds in front of invisible plane of ridge in right corner, drops splashing into copper birdbath in lower left foreground. Man in Moscow settling in for the long, cold Russian winter, noting Chang's "I made my eyes with my hand and gaze out toward you." Bogart walking across the room in the Maltese Falcon toward Peter Lorre, telling him, when you're slapped, you'll take it and like it. Lily Briscoe thinking, that's a chair, how it altered the composition of the picture. Horizontal width of gray-white sky to the right of the point on the left, dark gray sky behind the slope of the cliff, curving up opposite it. 12:12. Condensation on plane of window on the left, through which horizontal line at top of ridge. line of fading white jet trail and pale blue sky above it. The short-haired girl on the phone about to descend into the subway in Harlem, claiming all her friends have moved away. Afghan poet accompanied on two-string guitar, singing, "You sent me 330 kisses." Man entering Betty Ford Clinic, not allowed to have contact with women. Lily Briscoe looking at canvas blurred, laying down her brush in extreme fatigue. Yellow-orange circle of low sun behind a line of gray-white cloud, upturned curve of waning moon in blue of sky above it. 111. Shadows of tobacco plant leaves moving across sunlit white wall on left, actual green leaves moving against pale blue sky and window opposite it. Woman in dark glasses with hair pulled back, watching baby in pink jumpsuit crawl across sand toward edge of water. Man in the blue and white t-shirt walking toward her. Man on the radio noting half of all marriages end up in divorce. The woman asking, "Why don't I have compassion for myself?" Mrs. Ramsey looking from boy's sock to chairs and table in the room, asking, "Was it too short?" Blinding glare of low sun reflected off white plain after the wave breaks, green wall of swell on the right. 211. Horizontal pink streaks of cloud and pale blue sky above right sloping shoulder of still dark ridge in right corner. Sound of invisible waves breaking in channel below it. Blonde woman being warned the man with melanoma would be on dry ice in front hallway, seeing a waxy version of him as she walks in. Shirtless man leaning against white pillow on a stone wall, orange butterfly floating above bright green plain on the left. Lily Briscoe pretending to move her canvas, forgetting what she had been about to say. Curve of white spray blown back from light green face of wave breaking on left, a white gull gliding across from the right above it. 311. Gray-white film of sky tilting above vertical plane of green ridge, gray-green ridge, hummingbird perched on tip of branch, slanting up the right in front of it. Woman to the right of flat black column looking at what it means to live in symbiosis, how the woman places her hands on her hair. Silver-haired woman recalling flagging down Henry Miller's black Ford, who says he doesn't have time for bavardage. Mrs. Ramsey noting how the light had her at its beck and call, how when she woke it bent across their bed. Plain of gray-white sky behind the circular green pine on the point, vertical gray-green wall of swell approaching in right foreground.